But it's not even transmitting the desktop audio.
Thank you very much for having me again. We're going to be in Genesis
From the
39,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
then we will be skipping over to 41.
Does it something to do with the computer? I mean, the camera? Maybe?
Maybe. It could be.
Easily move this thing right along. 20% of Americans, when asked, reported that they hate their work. 70% of Americans report that they feel unfulfilled with their work. Bad boss, bad situations, a lot of times bad environments. So what do? We give less, we care less, and what we do is just enough to get by. But what if the problem isn't our job or our boss? What if the problem is who we think we're working for? Joseph didn't choose his job. He was sold into it. Joseph was sold into slavery, betrayed by his brothers. But Joseph understood something most of us don't. He wasn't working for other people. He was working for God. Faithfulness in the house. So up to this point, we're going to start with Genesis 39, 2 through 5. And up to this point, Joseph has been betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and then purchased by an Egyptian. The Lord was with Joseph, and I am in the ESV version. I know you guys usually do the King James, but that is much easier on my dyslexia. So I go with the ESV. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in the house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had and in the house and the field. Joseph is a slave, but he works like he owns the place. Joseph, his work was worship to God. The result is that God was with him. God blessed those around Joseph because of Joseph's faithfulness to God. Back in 2018, I was hired on as a sales person for a company called New England Rent-Own. They're a shed manufacturer here in Chelsea. And we ship sheds all over New England. And the company itself has two owners. One of them is Jeremy. He is the managing partner of the company. And the other one is Bobby. Bobby manages another company. So I didn't have a lot of interactions with Bobby. 99% of my interactions, through this story is with Jeremy. So when I refer to the owner, I'm really referring to Jeremy, even though there are two. And when I was hired on, and I first started this job, I could not stand my boss. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far to say that I hated my boss. I had a level of hatred in my heart for this man. We clashed a lot. We didn't communicate very well with each other. And the way that I saw it, I knew better. I treated customers better. I treated employees better. And at the end of the day, I had a better direction in my mind than he had for the company. And I could do it better. Now, a few years had gone by and I had the opportunity brought to me between financing and manufacturing to actually go out on my own and start my own company and do this for myself. Now, this temptation, eventually, I got through it, and my wife and I prayed, and we felt very strongly from God that I was put there for a reason I just had not figured out what that reason was. So I said no to that temptation. I could be my own boss. I could do it my way, and I could prove that I could be successful doing it. Now Joseph also faced a temptation. Faithfulness in temptation is my second point. And we're going to go to Genesis 39, 7 through 9. Which should be on the same page, I would think, for most people. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said no to his master's wife. "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything in that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin," my favorite part, "against God?" He's bringing God back into the temptation. You see, saying, "How can I do this sin against God?" recognizes that Joseph is recognizing that he is not there for himself. He is there to work and to exist solely for God. Your work reveals who you serve. So, to recap a little bit before we go into this next part, Potiphar's wife then makes a claim against Joseph. Joseph is thrown into prison. So think about it. He's thrown into slavery, sold into slavery by his brothers. He is faithful in the house. Then he is lied about and thrown into prison after reaching the pinnacle, the top of that he could possibly reach in the house. He is then thrown into prison. And what does he do there? He is faithful in prison. Going to Genesis 39, 21 through 23. But the Lord was with him, with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge, sounds familiar, of all the prisoners who were in the prison. However, whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison had paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it a success. All right. He does everything right and ends up back in prison. He was wronged, thrown into prison and forgotten, still faithful. See, this is where most people quit. And this is where my story changed. My wife, for many years, had wanted me to lead a Bible study. You need to lead a Bible study, you need to lead a Bible study. And she was really persistent with that. That is one thing that she has always been in my life, is very persistent. And I worked out a deal, because that's my MO. I negotiate. That's what makes me really good at my job now, is because I'm an incredible negotiator. It's one of the skills, one of the talents that God has given me. And I negotiated this deal out that I was not going to lead, but I was going to do the next best thing, and we would host a Bible study. And I convinced a friend of mine to lead the Bible study. Well, that only lasted for like 6 to 8 weeks, because he decided he was going to go into prison ministry, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm out. You got this." He's like, you can usually lead this. So, because I now had to lead this group, I was forced into it, but honestly, I should have done it from the beginning. The very first lesson that I taught was Work as Worship, which is what this sermon is mostly about, by J.D. Greer on Right Now Media. And this totally opened my eyes to these concepts of Joseph, how he worked as worship, and how even if you can't stand the place you are working for, it is not about the human you are working for, it is about the God you are working for. So I led that series. I decided to change my approach on how I was going to work. And I prayed that God would give me the opportunities to be able to show my work as worship to Him. And this would have been in 2022 into the 2023 season. And I had 2 multi-million-dollar deals that came across my path. They just kind of got thrown in my lap. The first one was a $2 million deal, and it got thrown in my lap. And this was the first big deal that I decided that I was going to do my work as worship to God, not to the company. And it happened to be the largest deal that the company had ever done. Up to that point, prior to that, was probably a $250,000, $300,000 deal, going up to a $2 million deal. And I handled that deal so well and included the owner of the company, because there were some obstacles I had to get by, that him and I started to work together towards a goal. Him and our relationship grew during that deal, and I got to see how he thinks, the behind the scenes on how he runs the company. And there were a lot of clashes him and I had where I thought I could do it better, but opening my eyes to the deeper and higher level of business that I had not been exposed to allowed me to have an appreciation for Jeremy and the way he thinks and the choices that he made. Now, because this deal went so well, and him and I worked so good towards it, another deal had come up, but I was not in charge of that one. Another employee was. And Jeremy took that $1 million deal from him and gave it to me because he was worried that, the other employee didn't have the exposure in such a high ticket deal, and he wanted it done right. And that one was initially on the rocks, but we landed that one as well. So we landed back-to-back multi-million-dollar deals, and to this day, Jeremy has told me, looking back at that moment, that those deals saved the company. Not because of anything I did, but because God changed my heart first, and then put me in the position to succeed. At that point, I poured everything into my position. I became a steward of the company, recognizing that it was not me, but it was God's faithfulness. It was God's to give me, to be a steward of. Jeremy and I bonded a very close relationship that exists to this day. I stopped hating and started working my best and giving my best. And just like Joseph, he changed the people around him. So Joseph has now been elevated to the top again in the prison. And then, I had to be really selective in the scriptures that I use, because otherwise this would turn into a 12-week sermon. You preach on Joseph and it just goes on and on and on, and there's so much context there. But to kind of stick to my point, we are going to skip ahead a little bit here to Genesis 41, 15 through 16. And to add some context here, Joseph is in prison. He meets a baker and a cupbearer. He gives them the revelation of their dreams. He interprets their dreams. Their dreams come true. The interpretations come true. Pharaoh's having a dream. The cupbearer happens to be the same cupbearer that was in prison with Joseph, and he says, "Oh shoot, I know a guy that could interpret this." And boom, next thing you know, Joseph is now sitting in front of Pharaoh, the most influential and arguably powerful person that existed on the planet at this time. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered, and it is not me, but God who will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So here's a man who's been thrown into slavery, thrown into prison, has the opportunity to get out, and still has the faithfulness to God. It says, not me, but God will be the one that interprets this for you. Skipping ahead to 39, same chapter, this is chapter 41, 39 through 41. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you. So what we skipped here is he did give him the correct interpretation of the dream. Pharaoh, in verse 40, you shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command, only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Though those multi-million-dollar deals that I landed paved the way to transform the company into what we do now. So we're no longer big in the shed and camp building industry. We're now in the residential development industry. And those deals were what we used to finance our ability to get into the housing market through mobile and modular home development and handling everything from the land work to setting homes. That was a hard turn that God took in the company that nobody really saw coming at the time. And the whole company, when I first started, there were conversations that we had where we were like, hey, you have to tell the customer X, Y, Z. And I knew that that wasn't true. And I would refuse to do it. And I would get in trouble for refusing to do it. To now, the company's motto is, if you lie to a customer, then you could get fired. We have completely turned, God has completely turned through my relationship with the owner and through the success that he has brought the company completely around in the ethics of the company and what we push as a company. It's also a much better place to work for now, too. I have a lot more fun now. So shortly after this happened, and actually it was one day that I was preaching here, we had a fire that burned down the manufacturing facility. So we were set up to be a manufacturer of homes, where we were going to build them here. And that ended up not working out because the manufacturing facility burned down, so our licensing wouldn't cover the other facility we had, and we need hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million worth of improvements to be able to get it up to snuff. So we decided to turn to ordering them from out of state. Now here's the kicker. The kicker is that the owner of the company approached me, and he told me that he wanted me to be the general manager. I went from salesman to general manager. I never asked for that. I never went to my boss and said, hey man, how do you feel about putting me in charge? It was through my faithfulness to God that revealed the blessings of the people around me, that then the owner turned around and blessed me and my family with a promotion, and has now put me in second in command of the company. Again, nothing I did. It is all what God did in me to then change the people around me. It was the same job, different purpose. It was the same boss, different attitude. It was the same work, different effort. What would change if tomorrow you worked like you were working for God instead of working for your boss? See, you don't control the position you are in. You control your faithfulness to God. Joseph didn't rise because of luck. I think I forgot a couple slides here. There we go. There we go. Joseph didn't rise because of luck. He rose because of his faithfulness when nobody was watching. People around you need the blessings that God has in store for them through your faithfulness. In the house, faithful. In temptation, faithful. In prison, faithful. And then in the palace is influence. Through your faithfulness, God will provide his influence through you. When work becomes worship, God turns your faithfulness into influence. There we go. That's it short.